Class, everybody sit down. No, you can't eat the glue right now. Hand traps feel completely pointless in Yu-Gi-Oh right now. And in case you didn't know, that is not a good thing. Today, class, not only will we be breaking down the initial purpose of hand traps so you can stay educated and on your game, we're actually going to be talking about the problems and how Yu-Gi-Oh is changing right now. What state do we have to be in that makes hand traps almost ineffective? And of course, another huge issue in the game. Now, class, I hope you guys brought your materials needed to be able to participate in this work assignment, your Raven Wing version 3s that you can catch on TheCaliEffect.com, as well as your play mats. Get them right now on TheCaliEffect.com while supplies last, because we have so much to talk about with this particular topic. And yes, of course, you have classwork. Let's go ahead and jump on in. What's going on with ya, big dogs? And it is an amazing day for Yu-Gi-Oh! I hope that's your day. Phenomenal. But if it isn't, don't let what happened at the beginning of your day ruin the rest of your day. Hand traps. Woo! I think just about everyone has an opinion on hand traps, whether you hate them or you love them, if you think they're necessary or if you think that they should never exist. They are easily some of the most polarizing Yu-Gi-Oh cards, so polarizing that I made a video on them talking about why everyone hates hand traps. That video goes in depth, in detail, talking about why hand traps were a necessity in the Yu-Gi-Oh card game and how certain hand traps have grown to be some of the most hated cards of all time. But speaking of that, we have to jump into our first thing when it comes to this video. What is the actual design of hand traps? Well, if you guys didn't already know, you just plop them out of your hand, stop your opponent from doing everything, and boom, 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 boom. You can even use hand traps nowadays to win the game. Nibiru the Primal Being is 3,000 attack.
And now you're telling me they thought they could drive trucks?
In all seriousness, from a design perspective, hand traps are the epitome of Yu-Gi-Oh! You've activated my trap card had to get faster and faster. Unfortunately, for the most part, most trap cards couldn't be activated before you got your turn. Hand traps were simply made because Yu-Gi-Oh strategies were getting stronger and stronger. It started to become closer towards a coin flip simulator in Yu-Gi-Oh, where if your opponent got to go first, they would place some of the most strongest cards in the game where you simply couldn't keep up. Hand traps are the balancing scale for those cards, being cards that are generally useless in almost every single aspect of the game, for the exception of being able to stop your opponent from doing things on their turn. And when hand traps do their job but aren't overbearing, it creates really good formats. Like, for example, Edison format has Effect Veiler as their primary hand trap, and it does a really good job at stopping the cards that it needs to stop, having its own restrictions, and being a card that can be really good and bad in certain situations. There's also other non-conventional hand traps inside of that format, like Honest and Gores, cards that actually kept a functionality of the game, the battle phase, relevant, while adding another dynamic, a wrinkle in the game for fitting certain parameters. There's even examples of super powerful hand traps existing at that time and being pretty harmless. In the Tengu Plant format, which is not even a full year later, Maxi was introduced. This card is nowhere near the level of power that it would be in today's Yu-Gi-Oh game. And around that same time, Droll Lockbird was also introduced, another card that is nowhere near in terms of strength what it needed. To go back to my point, hand traps are an important thing for Yu-Gi-Oh is because it allows you to be able to address a particular section of the game, keep it in check, and diversify the skill tree that can happen. The problem where Konami really fumbled is that they didn't keep certain hand traps in check. This created situations years on down the line where Yu-Gi-Oh strategies were advanced enough to be able to use one card combos and then play a ton of hand traps. It became a determining factor in so many games. Alongside of the card's expense, Yu-Gi-Oh was coined as the game pay to win. I think that Konami failed on multiple aspects in that particular category. In actuality, there are so many videos that can be made when it comes to Konami's shady business tactics and of course how they run their Yu-Gi-Oh game. Now in modern Yu-Gi-Oh, we're feeling somewhat of an opposite effect. Hand traps are not effective in Yu-Gi-Oh when you really need it to be. You see, all of the things that I talked about in the earlier part of this video applied all the way up until pretty much now. A really big problem in Yu-Gi-Oh is that hand traps are not effective right now. The balance just isn't working anymore. Because in previous Yu-Gi-Oh, you would give up one card in your hand to be able to stop one particular interaction. Oftentimes, your opponent was able to keep the monster. You'd essentially lose card economy in your hand to prevent an effect. The benefit is that the effect is typically really powerful for your opponent. The drawback is that your opponent got to keep the card, which used to be an even trade until we got into Modern Yu-Gi-Oh! In Modern Yu-Gi-Oh!, trading that one card from your hand to stop an opponent's card effect without getting rid of it is damn near a death sentence. Powerful decks like Yugioh not only have multiple ways to be able to dodge certain hand traps if your opponent sequences it correctly, it also simply doesn't care if your opponent hand traps it with a card like Ash Blossom or Infinite Impermanence or not, because the central theme of the strategy is to be a rank 4 Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck. At this point in time, we've actually experienced the holy trinity when it comes to Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck building. A very powerful Yu-Gi-Oh! Card that not only replaces itself, it's also a card when left on the field can be used for other devices. Now, the good thing is that that problem has always existed in Yu-Gi-Oh! There have been Yu-Gi-Oh! Strategies that have just needed the bodies on the field to be able to operate while the effects being a bonus. The only problem with that particular situation is that those particular Yu-Gi-Oh! Strategies fell victim to some of the other hand traps. Cards like Nibiru the Primal Being and Ghost Ogre being monsters to actually rid the threat on the side of the field was typically another way to play the game. You see, these cards didn't necessarily stop the effect, but got rid of the card. And usually when you go against those particular Yu-Gi-Oh! Decks, those cards are fairly strong. But when we go back to our Yugioh example or even the Malice Yu-Gi-Oh! Strategy, those cards simply don't work either. And it's because of the deck's built-in insulation. Right now in Yu-Gi-Oh! Decks like Yugioh have cards like Yugioh Cross, a card that oftentimes they can get to their side of the field alongside of an Xyz monster before cards like Nibiru can become even active. And then for cards like Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit, not only does the deck have built-in protection on some of their card effects, there are also multiple times where they just need the effect to go through. And that's where we start to get to the huge issue with hand traps. Against some of the best decks in the game, they're not enough. But against just about every other single deck in the game, they can be really tough, especially when you can play a ton of them. A little while ago, I made a video talking about how one-card combos were a problem in Yu-Gi-Oh! The main reason is just simple math. If your entire deck can operate off of a one-card combo, it means mathematically, instead of having to play 26 to 28 cards, you can get away with playing 15 or 20 cards that are dedicated to your actual strategy. And with at least 50% of your deck being able to play just about anything else you want, players have been opting to play a lot of hand traps. And with those particular Yu-Gi-Oh! Strategies having 50% of card space for just disruption cards, it means that the 2-card combo decks get absolutely obliterated. 1-card combo strategies can throw enough 1 cards at your opponent, and since mathematically those 2-card combo decks would have less hand traps to stop the 1-card combo decks, you're getting cooked. And nowadays, players have found a way to make those 1-card combos even more powerful. Originally, the idea was just to play the 1-card combo with 20 hand traps, but it becomes a lot more effective to play the 1-card combo deck with another 1-card combo engine. Engines like Fiendsmith forces your opponent to use their resources on stopping that particular engine, because if they don't, you summon cards on your side of the field that can stop all of their hand traps. With DDD Wave King Caesar stopping one of the best hand traps in the format, Nibiru the Primal Being, or Fiendsmith Desiree, which could stop the best hand trap in the game, Infinite Impermanence, while being a monster that is technically an Omni Negate. These cards essentially divide the purpose of your hand traps, which makes them even more useless. But it's not to say that all hand traps are that issue. Players have been adopting a little bit in this Yu-Gi-Oh! Format. Hand traps that have lingering effects have been some of the most effective. The Mole Charmy cards in Perulia, Meows, and Flawless have been amazing because they allow players to be able to get cards. Droll and Lockbird, Artifact Lancia, and Chaos Hunter. Preventative lingering cards that can really slow down a particular strategy. But still, the huge issue in Yu-Gi-Oh! Right now is hand traps and why they are not as effective right now. As you can see in Yu-Gi-Oh!, when one particular facet of the game breaks down, you start to see more of the other things take over, which could not be fun. But that actually might not be the end of the world. You see, we have to go back to what I originally said. Yu-Gi-Oh! Players absolutely hate hand traps. And it's mainly because they're way too effective when you can combine them together, and they're often oppressive if you're going first and your opponent doesn't have any. That's why some of the newer hand traps have been designed a lot differently. Dominus Impulse and Purge are actual hand traps. Trap cards that can be activated from the hand, but the drawback is when you do that, you can't activate a particular attributes. This prevents them from not only being combined with certain Yu-Gi-Oh decks, it prevents them from being combined with certain hand traps as well. They also have an ability to not only stop a particular action, they can get rid of the card too, so long as you play other trap cards in combination with them. I genuinely like this game design. And if this is done right, this could be the exact format that Yu-Gi-Oh players were asking for. Slifer Slackers, Reading Raws, and Outstanding Obelisk, all of you guys have this assignment. I want you guys to let me know, are you team hand trap, or do you think hand traps need to stay bad? It's kind of weird that we had cards like Cold by the Grave, Crossout Designator, and Triple Tactics Talent all hit to make hand traps stronger, and they're in an abysmal state right now. So it might seem like Konami may know exactly what they're talking about when it comes to making a format good. But this new way of Yu-Gi-Oh may come at a huge price. And if you don't like it, I need you guys to voice your opinion. One thing that I hate about Yu-Gi-Oh is sitting across from the opponent and waiting 40 minutes for them to combo. The absence of hand traps pretty much means that that's gonna happen a lot more. It also feels a little bit even more Gamba-esque and money-driven because the Molcharmi cards are pretty expensive and they feel almost mandatory for the game right now. And I personally think anytime Floodgate Yu-Gi-Oh cards are the topic of discussion, like when I talked about in a previous video, then we're in a really bad Yu-Gi-Oh state. But go ahead and let me know down below in the comment section for your worksheet. Make sure to go to TheCaliEffect.com to be able to pick up your merch. And if you guys just want to support the channel but can't necessarily get merch, it is perfectly fine, big dog. You can go ahead and check on these videos so I could catch you on the next one. It really does help.